I hope you got your green caps, because we're going on a Legend of Zelda-esque adventure in Ittle Dew. Not to be confused with Little Dew, but Ittle Dew. So this is an interesting title. This was what I have is a Force Print Games version. As far as I know, it's the only physical version of Ittle Dew 1. Ittle Dew 2 did get a physical release on Switch, but that's besides the point. So Ittle Dew is a very... It's not even really lightly wearing Legend of Zelda on its sleeve. It is openly making fun of it, like so much during the gameplay. You play as Ittle, who crash lands on an island with their friend Tipsy, and you basically go about on a little adventure. Now, if you're looking for a difficult or a decently challenging Zelda experience, you're not going to find it so much in Ittle Dew. Ittle Dew is definitely a more puzzle-friendly. Not that it doesn't have challenges. There is a side dungeon that offers some challenges, and there are an interesting idea in it, side paths for those who have a little bit more problem solving or easier time with solving puzzles that offer alternate routes through the castle. But at its core, it's a very simplistic, stripped-down Zelda with only really 4 utensils, or technically 5, if you count your beginning weapon, the stick, which you do go back to, and I'll explain on how that is. So, starting on the island, you start with a tree branch as your only melee tool that you have in your arsenal. Later, you'll get the fire blade, which will help you set things on fire. But with the stick, if you stick it in the fire, it will temporarily have the ability to set things on fire. Throughout your adventure, you will get 3 more utensils. Well, I mean, the fire sword is technically one of those utensils, but I guess what I should say is one of those utensils will offer you 2 powers. So, you'll have 3 more abilities. You'll have the ability to make a block that you can move. You can also use a switcheroo spell, which will switch something with the place of the block. Not all things can be affected by this, but you can, along with certain enemies and objects. And then you have the ice rod, which freezes shit and can make a bouncy thing off the wall, which you can actually use your teleporting spell on. All these combined, by the end game, you will be using a combination of all these. For example, like, you can freeze your block, and now you can push it across the screen as opposed to pushing it one by one, and this is useful because they can slide over spikes and such. So, by the end of the game, similar to Zelda, you will be making use of all your tools to finish your adventure. But it is, again, stripped down to your 4 things. A melee attack, making a brick, being able to swap things with said brick, and freezing stuff. It does pull off a few different puzzles with these tools all together, but it's still, as I said at its core, stripped down, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's a short, nice little affair of a Zelda title. I'd say probably my biggest problem with it is not necessarily that it is a more easier, fairer, or not necessarily, maybe what I should say is, not very stressful, not necessarily fair. It's actually more on the easy side, like dying you just restart in the room you're in. So, I mean, it's really easy is more like it, but it's a casual affair and then it's all good in that. But I'd say the thing that really bothers me about Little Dew myself is the fact that it's just very linear. The only part that has any real choices that you can kind of side path is in the main dungeon, the castle. Now, there are other dungeons, and how the game's basic core works is essentially you go into the castle, you get money. Now, money is not like in a traditional game where, you're killing things and digging through grass and chests and things. Money is pretty much its own fucking item, because they're in preset chests, and you have to find all those to get the next item. So you'll pay a gentleman the money, and you'll be sent to the dungeon where said item is. So each of the 3 items, the fire sword, the warpy wand, and the ice wad, are each at 3 separate dungeons. How the stick mechanic comes back into play as you buy your upgrades. So every time the shopkeeper sends you to one of the new dungeons that you've unlocked by paying him, you basically lose your current gear. So if you have like the flame sword and the magic wand, you'll lose those and you'll be sent to the new dungeon with only the stick, and you have to find the new item, and through the new item and the stick, you have to go through the dungeon and its boss. That's basically how your stick comes back into play. So you'll use your stick 3 more occasions throughout the game outside of the beginning opening area. So you do get use out of your stick still, but you don't get the ability to switch to it, because there's really no reason to switch to it. The flame sword is stronger and automatically sets things on fire. So other than that, you only have one other side dungeon you can do other than the castle. The castle, like I said, being the main dungeon you have to go through, does offer side paths for the more clever. These paths are optional, but if met challenge and took it on, you can find alternate ways through the castle, which is a really interesting idea, but being the only real freedom you have in the game is just kinda eh. Now, there are little side caves and things you can find in the small areas leading to the dungeons. Or should I say, when you're leaving the other dungeons to get back to the main road. But these paths are pretty obvious, easy to find, and the only meaningful reward is to get more hearts, which, of course, in a Zelda game is good. But the only other thing is cards, which don't actually do anything in the game at all. Now, they do offer a bit of insight on several of the characters, which are mostly the enemies, but there's a few other entries on them. And they're funny and silly and stuff, but they don't do anything. They don't have any functionality in the game, so they're just kind of there for the sake of collecting. And, you know, that's pretty much it. There's not really anything behind them. So it makes the exploring feel not rewarding, in my opinion. You know, one of the reasons I really like Link to the Past, for example, is I have many memories just finding the extra stuff you don't even fucking need to finish the game. Like, it's just very rewarding finding shit like that. And you don't get any of that in Little Dew, which is a shame. Now, Little Dew does help you. Tipsy has a whole bunch devoted themselves to help you, guide you through problems. So if you're a little stuck, they may help you, point you in the right way. And you don't find maps and compasses, but you are given a map that you fill out as you make your journey. So you'll always have that, and the game is very nice to give you a general idea of where you need to go in case you're confused where the next chest you need for money is to continue forth on your quest. Ultimately, Little Dew to me is... I wouldn't say it's a horrible game at all. It functions, it does what it does. It has a lot of nice humor and throwbacks to Zelda. A lot of Zelda humor. Some good, some a little hit and miss. But overall, like I said, it's not... It's practically wearing Zelda on it versus just making little off-color jokes. There's a lot of references to Zelda and maybe other things. There's a lot of neat things in the environment you can find, and sometimes your character will even comment on them. I don't necessarily know what all of them are references, or they may be references to other things outside of just Zelda. But otherwise, I like the art style and stuff, and the music does the job, but it's not anything to go down in history. Little Dew is a nice little game if you're desperate for something Zelda-esque, but it's a simple and more beginner-friendly title with some side things they can do in the main dungeon. Overall, though, I wouldn't say this is going to go down in my history book as like, oh, that amazing game that everyone should play. But it's not horrible at all. It functions, didn't have any problems at all with the game, no crashes or anything. Works 100% fine on the physical cartridge. This is the Switch version to make sure if that's not clear. So, what would I give this game value-wise? I think Little Dew would be a little better as a $5 game myself when it comes to its digital prices. As we said with physical stuff before, it's hard to justify a brand new physical lower than $19.99. But this game was a $39.99 title. Oof. Very expensive. I think $20, or maybe even $25 would have been a much better price, because this is a very short game. It's only like 3 hours, 4 hours, depending on how good you are at problem solving. And then, of course, if you go hunt down everything in the game, I'm sure that'll add a little bit more time. Again, it's not a terrible game, but it's not something I would think, like, I mean, Undertale you can get for fucking $10, and that game's a lot more memorable, fun, enjoyable, and everything. Again, not to say the game isn't interesting or fun, or, like, it's just, it doesn't wing something I'm going to list as a classic, if you know what I mean. If it feels a little bit more forgettable, not to mean that in a rude way. Now, luckily though, if the physical does seem pricey, which I find it hard to say it's not pricey, this is available DRM-free on GOG, and of course it's on Steam as well, if that interests you. It was released on the Wii U as well, but I don't think you can get that anymore, so yeah, whip for that. It is $10, $9.99 across all platforms, so yeah, you're not going to really get lower than that unless you get on a sale, of course. But it's not a horrible price, $10. I just feel like there could have been a little bit more done with the game to justify the $10 myself. I would have liked it a lot more, how should I say, freedom. Like I said, it feels very linear aside from the castle. The castle has a few alternate routes you can go through it, but all the other dungeons are very linear in one way to do them. And it doesn't feel as interesting, because the exploring is just very, how should I say, forced. It doesn't feel like you're exploring the world. You're just being forcibly pointed where to go. I mean, you don't even walk to the dungeons. You get this kind of secret of mana kind of being shot out over the island and then falling where the dungeon is. It just kind of hurts the explorative nature of a Zelda game. But I would definitely say I would check it out if you're looking for something short, quick, or something just desperate for Zelda. Otherwise, if you're looking for something a lot more accurate to Zelda, and there's the humor too. Humor as well. But if you're looking for something a lot more on par with Zelda-esque games, I would probably go look somewhere else. This is a much easier affair. So, but if you got a youngling you want to introduce to Zelda-esque games, it's definitely not a horrible game to have them try out, though, in that regards. For a newbie, I could see it being a different experience, of course, because I'm viewing the game as someone who's played a lot of these kind of games, so for a newbie person, I could see it as also a nice recommendation. Overall, though, those are my main thoughts on Little Dew. So let's go ahead quickly over the spoilers of the story aspect for anyone who wants my thoughts on that. So, spoilers. So, Little Dew's story is, well, a little odd to be, Ittle Dew's story, did I say Ittle Dew's story is a little odd. So, essentially, when you arrive on this island, there's this pirate dude who says he carved everything in his shop. He basically says he'll carve you a raft if you get him the artifact at the castle. So that's what begins your journey into the castle, but you find dead ends because you need more tools. Now, he proposes that he sells these other tools, but when you go to make a purchase, he'll tell you, sadly, he doesn't actually have it, but he can send you to where it is. So you pay him, you get shot over to the dungeon, you do the dungeon, and you do have to go through that dungeon with your stick, as you will lose your items you currently have. So if you have like the wand item and the fire sword, then you lose it, and you get tossed into the new dungeon with your stick, and you have to find a new item and go through it with those two. So it kind of leaves you in a situation that revolves around the new item in each of the dungeons. But, yeah. But anyway, you'll go through all that, and you'll get to the boss of the castle and find out it's the pirate dude. The pirate dude basically tells you he made this all for adventurers and shit. And Ittle, just basically annoyed by the whole process, just kicks his ass, gets the waft, and fucking leaves. But oddly, he does take the pirate with him. I guess no ill blood in the end after all. And Tipsy, Little Dew, and the pirates all sail the sea, and you get a little funny kind of history lesson on the island in the credits, where you learn that the creatures in the castle and the turnips had like a war on the island, and the turnips lost, and then they went to peace, and he came on the island and made it how it is now and stuff. It's really bizarre, but it gives it some context of what the fuck happened with the island, I guess. It'll be interesting to see what Little Dew 2 brings to the table, because they got a full retail release, so I'm hoping for a bigger and more Zelda-esque adventure on that one myself. I do have that one as well, and one day, hopefully, I'll get to it. It is supposed to be a more longer affair, I believe. I think it said the average is about 12 hours, so definitely a much lengthier game. But those are my thoughts on Little Dew at the end of the day. Hopefully you be safe on your journey out there in the Proving Grounds.